I'll let you know first. I have two things in the jumbotron. One is an article defining gaslighting, just as a basis for our discussion, so we're on the same page. As well as my free live event coming up, the Keys to Healing Black Trauma. Is coming up in a couple weeks, so it's a free event. Definitely make sure you click the link, be a part of that. I'm definitely going to dive deep into the strategies that we need on a as a whole, but also on an individual level, as far as how to heal from everything from childhood trauma, racial trauma, relationship trauma, etc. Um, Everything that becomes symptoms like isolation, symptoms like people pleasing, like perfectionism, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, all of those dark areas, and how to reprogram ourselves. So that's going to be it's going to be a big one, so I definitely want to make sure as many people come through as possible, and get the info, get the intel, because I'm excited and passionate to heal our people. And so, without further ado, let's get into the topic. I'm actually going to read the definition from Psychology Today, and get for gaslighting. And it says, an insidious form of manipulation and psychological control. Victims of gaslighting are deliberately and systematically fed false information that leads them to question what they know to be true about themselves. They may end up doubting their memory, their perception, and even their sanity. And so, before I begin, my battery's kind of low, so if I end up getting cut off, we'll definitely do a part two. But I should have enough to get enough to come through. But so that's the definition, or one of several definitions about gaslighting. The origin of the term, because it hasn't always been a term. It's derived from a play by a man by the name of Patrick Hamilton, and this was in 1938. So this was it was a play set in 1880s London, and it was a married couple. The husband married into money, so the wife, she had some difficulties, may have been self-esteem related, but some mild difficulties, and vulnerabilities, insecurities, etc. And the husband, his goal was to steal from his wife. So he used a bunch of tactics inside of the home to cause her to doubt herself, to doubt her memory, her actions, right? And I believe she had, like, at one point maybe had an episode of depression, and then he kind of used that as the anchor to make it seem like she was mentally off. And so he created these situations to make her feel like she was losing her mind. And he was the one driving this energy, right? So it wasn't that she was losing her mind. He was the one driving the driving force behind it. And so he would do things like uh flicker the gas light as she was looking for something, using a light to look for something, and he would flicker the gas light and then act like he didn't know, or act like he didn't see anything, or act like the light didn't flicker, and say, like, what are you talking about? You're starting to lose touch again. um he would hide letters that she would get in the mail, and act like he didn't know what she was talking about. uh he would lie to her about certain things. He actually, because you can watch the play, or the film adaptation on YouTube. He actually took a painting off of the wall himself and stashed it behind, like, so it's like a bookcase or a chair or something like that, and then confronted her and asked her why did she move the painting. And she was like, I didn't touch the painting. And he was like, you moved it. You must be forgetting again. You must be losing your memory, right? So So the whole goal was for him to manipulate her into questioning herself so much and being so vulnerable to his leadership and his so-called guidance, that he was able to manipulate her out of her money, and to have her buy things that he wanted, um by convincing her that they were necessary. And because even the house, if you ever watch the film, the house, it's a black and white, but the house that they were in, he convinced her to buy it. She didn't even want to buy the house, right? So he would create these conditions to make her miserable and to make her beholden to him and his leadership, right? And so if you fast forward to now, in relationships, one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the people that I work with as a trauma recovery coach, a lot of them have endured or dealt with partners that would drive, or be a driving force to them questioning themselves and questioning their concerns, right? Or questioning anything that they may bring up in the relationship that's a problem. And this form of manipulations has several different origins. So I want to also too talk about, like, where it comes from. Like, why would a person need to do this to another person, right? Because gaslighting is about power. It's about manipulation for the sake of keeping a person imbalanced, and so that they can't be held accountable, so that they can do whatever they want to do, and then so they can also create a dependence on that person, right? So they won't that person is not likely to leave them. So they'll do a lot of things. Like, one thing in the film that was going on too, the husband isolated his wife, right? So there was a point where his wife was talking about some of her friends, and she was like, I want to see my friends. And he was like, no, those are the same friends that tried to break us up. You don't need them, right? So doing different things to keep that person isolated. Why would somebody want to do that? Because if you take somebody out of their home element, they can't get good advice to leave you, right? So somebody who uses gaslighting doesn't want their victim, or their partner, to be around a lot of people who, number one, they may be loyal to, but number two, who may instruct them to leave, because then you have no control over that person if they end up leaving you, right? So with that being said, that's the origin is based in vulnerability, and it's based on pain, and it's based on trauma, right? So I'm gonna break that down right now. Like, how is a gaslighter born? Like, whose man's is this? Right? When you see somebody who starts doing that, or you have an ex who has, been a gaslighter, manipulator, it's like, where does this person come from? And, you know, although these people may seem very powerful and may have had power over you or people that it's not power, it's fear. The reason why they're so consistent with this type of behavior is fear, right? So, for example, if you have a child who was abandoned, or was by one of or both of their parents, or was neglected, or was verbally abused in any kind of way, or witnessed a lot of abuse, you know those are some of the elements that can birth a baby gaslighter, like somebody who would eventually end up doing that, and being somebody who gaslights as a tactic, right? And the reason is, when you're young, when you're impressionable, that whole 0 to 7 age range, where you're the most susceptible to programming. um as a child at that age, you're very vulnerable to to threats to safety. Because if you're in between the ages of 0 and 7, your parents are your safety, right? They control if you eat, how much you eat, when you get to eat, right? They control your protection mechanism, the emotional safety. All of these different things factor in. And so if you have a point where you build bonds with both your parents and then one of them leaves, one of them dies, or one of them is abusive, right now there's an environment where that vulnerability, that child's vulnerability will eventually be looked at as a point of like lack of safety, right? So if your safety mechanism is broken, you will then, as you grow, say, I can't be vulnerable because that pain that I just dealt with, I can't deal with that again. So I can never be vulnerable again. And what's the number one situation where you're the most emotionally vulnerable? It's a relationship, right? So when these people grow up, relationships become the scariest situation that they could possibly be in, because they relationships equal vulnerability in most cases, right? If you want a real relationship, you're gonna have to be vulnerable to some degree. The problem is if this person has already built these guards over their heart for years and decades of time, they're afraid to have their heart opened in a relationship, to have it broken again, like they like happened when they were a child. So if that's the case, they'd rather go into relationships being in control of the other person. So they don't seek love, they seek control. So that's where the manipulation comes in, because you don't want to be vulnerable, you want to create vulnerability. So how can this person who's afraid of love and vulnerability create vulnerability in another person? A tactic you may have heard of called love bombing usually is connected to people who use gaslighting, right? So why love bomb somebody? Love bombing, number one, it's putting a lot of all the things that people like about being in love, putting front loading all of that to the beginning of the relationship. So, an example might be, for the ladies in here, an example might be, somebody who you've been dating them for like a couple weeks, and they already talking about, they want to marry you, they want to be with you for the rest of their life. They have all of these big gestures, right? And they're saying all of these things to you that you want to hear, and it's this very high level, consistent and intense love based, or seemingly love based energy in the beginning, like really early, right? Now the problem is, everybody, some depending on where you are, right? Some women may fall for it, some women may not. But the thing about a manipulator is, again, they fear vulnerability so much, but they also are keen at spotting it. So they can sniff out somebody who is desperate for love. They can sniff out somebody who has been hurt a bunch of times and vulnerable, right? They can sniff out somebody who would likely take hold of a lot of this love bombing and think that it's real. And once they get you to a point where you think it's real, you're vulnerable. They got you, right? So once they get you into that space, then they start to make maneuvers. And that's when the small lying turns into bigger lying, right? And you'll also find it common where these people, or these particular partners you may have, can't be held accountable for anything. And if you try to make them accountable for mistakes or for inconsistencies, or for, hey, you were doing all of this romantic such and such, now you're not doing it, right? If you bring this up, you know, number one, they'll likely deflect and make it seem like something's wrong with you for asking, or you're asking for something astronomical, or why you always, pressure me about something, and or they'll shift into victim mode and act like they're going through something right now, and you making life harder so that you back away, right? And you try to be a nurturer to them because they're so-called going through something, right? um so they can't be held accountable for any mistakes, and a lot of times they'll move the goalposts around and make you feel like, which either make you feel like what you're requesting is too much, or not recall a time that they promised you something, or a time that they said that they were going to not do XYZ. I don't remember that. You making it up, or and that's where the gaslighting comes from. It's this consistent tactic of deflecting any and all, you know accountability, or any concerns, or anything you may have to hold them to any sort of standard. However, they want to hold you to the strictest of standards, and everything you try to do, hanging out with friends or certain family, if they don't like the family, or you going out, or whatever the case is, like, a lot of times they'll have a lot of issues with everything you do and find ways to make you feel bad. And another thing too is the guilt factor. If a manipulator finds out that you have issues with guilt, they're going to press that button consistently. They're going to press that button all day, as long as it works, right? And that basically causes an issue, because you are now in this vulnerable position. And if this goes on for years of time, it makes it harder for you to leave, because now you may be married to this person. Now you may have years in the game. You may be so emotionally connected that maybe even you are making excuses in your head to justify staying with this person. Maybe they convince you that you the problem. And if you think you the problem, what are you going to do? You're going to be working and doing your best to not be the problem. And you're going to be fighting a losing battle, because, again, they're going to be moving the goalposts and creating this dynamic where you feel like you got to please this person, and you don't. And not only that, but you can't, because this person will constantly know how to activate your response system, so that you turn into back into giving mode, or back into, the emotional caretaker for this person. And so it's a very deep concept, and it's something that shows up friendships, work environments. It's not only just relationships, but relationships is the most difficult, because you could leave a it's easier to leave a job. You know what I'm saying? You get a better job environment, or whatever, better work environment, you could just hop up and get out of there. But when it comes to relationships, your emotions are involved, and that's why it's really difficult to disconnect, because this person already tampered with your emotions and created this false bond by all of that love bombing in the beginning, and they've already scanned you for all of your weaknesses. You know what I'm saying? And that's another tactic of people who have been hurt or have dealt with trauma, is they're when something happens to you, you become hypersensitive to it. It becomes almost an obsession, right? So, for example, if you've experienced abandonment as a child, in most cases you're going to go through life and be looking for abandonment scenarios, or looking at every situation, that or every falling out with friendships, or with, anything that you go through that involves people, where they're there and then they're not for whatever reason. You're gonna classify it as a continuing of your abandonment cycle. You're gonna say, see, everybody just up and leave, or see people just be ghosting me, and you're gonna be hyper focused on it. So for somebody who's a gaslighter, right, they become hyper focused on other people's vulnerabilities, because that's the very thing they refuse to give up. So they know how to spot it in you, because it used to be them, but it was so long ago that they've built up so many walls around it, but they can still recognize it because they're still fearful of it. When you're hurt by something, if you don't make the shifts, if you don't do the healing, you'll remain forever fearful of that thing. And when you're fearful of something, you will do any and everything to not encounter it. And that's really the biggest problem when dealing with you know long lasting trauma, and how it infects your mindset and creates habits and personality traits in you, is because if you're making fear based decisions, you are making bad decisions for yourself, and you are continuing the very cycle that you're trying to get off of. It becomes a very sick sort of cycle, like that feeds on itself, because as you try to prevent something, you're causing more of it, right? That's because fear is at the base. And when it comes to trauma, fear is always at the base. That's the first thing, because after that initial event, after that abandonment, after that abuse, after that neglect and all of that, whatever happened, that's the first thing that caused that turning point in you to feel like, okay, I have something to be scared of now. Because again, at that age, when you're a child and you're that young, it is life or death. Your parents being present and involved, and a peaceful, nurturing, emotional space, that is life and death. Because you could die if your parents just left you. Like those earlier months and first couple of years, yeah, that's life and death. So when you have a life or death event at 2, 3, 4 years old, you think that's not gonna stick. Always remember, the years between 0 and 7 years old are the most you're the most susceptible to programming, and everything that all the programming you download from that time frame is the blueprint for your personality and who you become as an adult. And it doesn't go anywhere unless you have unless you undergo a healing process where you actually reprogram that. And that's what I'm going to talk about on my live event. So definitely, I'll take a pause here. Definitely click the link in the jumbotron. That's my upcoming event, free event. We're gonna break everything down on every level, on how to heal, how to reprogram these things. And so if you've gone through any of this, if or even gaslighting, which is the topic, right? If you have endured relationships where you have been gaslighted, it's critical for you to go through a healing process, because there's a lot of lasting effects, not only from those relationships, but how did you end up connected to those people in the first place. A lot of times there's you know similar energies. Whenever we choose somebody to be with, there's similar energies there. I know we always have. Everybody got an ex story, right? Everybody got the worst ex. Let me tell you about my ex, da da da. And there's we all have exes that have done these different things, and it's never to justify those activities, or those behaviors. However, we resonated with them enough to carry that into a relationship, because none of us were in a relationship at gunpoint, right? So in that moment, we have to realize we invited this on some level. And knowing that, number one, it empowers us, because if we invited it, we can reject it. If we do the work, we can reject that in the future. I think a lot of times the misconception is like being out and dating is a scary place because there's all these manipulators out here. And it's like a lottery ticket. It's like a lottery, like a roll of the dice. Like I don't, you just never know. Somebody could be like a closeted narcissist or something, and I might, and it's just that is scary if it can just happen like that. However, if you undergo the proper healing process, number one, your energy won't resonate with that person because you won't be the same person, and you will have let go of the parts of you that made you connect with those similar types. That's why most people I talk to, um, just being a trauma recovery coach, right? Most people I talk to, a lot of the exes are similar. Like a lot of times they'll it's very easy for people to name similar qualities in some of their exes, right? Now the other side of it is there's what I call like the rubber band effect, where like for example, if you date somebody who's a cheater, right? And then you find out, you deal with it, you suffer the betrayal, you end up breaking it off, or the relationship dissipates, and you from there, all being incurring certain damage and everything like that, you say to yourself, I'm not going to date anybody that has ever cheated, like, or is a cheater, like, so I'm anti-cheater. So you go into the dating world with this mantra like, I can't mess with nobody that cheats, which okay. But if you date too soon without healing in between, without rectifying certain things in between, you'll meet somebody who you resonate with. But the problem will be different because you're so hyper focused on cheating. You might find somebody who never cheated in their life, and would never cheat on you whatsoever. But they got an alcohol issue, or there's like something else that pulls you into another thing. And the reason for that is that it's the energy, and it's the dynamic, right? So if you're a rescuer, you're gonna meet you if you're a rescuer in extremes, right? You're gonna meet people who one ex might cheat, the other one might have an alcohol issue, the other one might have lost a lot of family members, right? And so you will constantly you will meet people and resonate with people who you need to save. It don't matter the type of saving that you got to do. It don't matter what the activity is. The dynamic is the same, right? And that's what has to be broken. The need to either fix someone else, or the lack of, whether it's self-esteem based, right? Whether you feel that you need to do all of these things to be valuable. You need to be any and everything to certain people to be valued. You need to be in a relationship, no matter what kind, as long as you're in a relationship to get certain validation. That means that there's a hole somewhere. There's a deficit somewhere. There's something that needs to be filled up, and it's not going to be filled up by another individual. The the it, it has to be, or it should be, I'll say this, that's just my personal advice, like that should be filled up before going into that relationship, because you're you always get your perfect match. It just Meaning it's not the perfect relationship, but you're gonna find your perfect match to where you are, and what level of what your dynamic is, what your programming is, what your personality is, what your trauma is, what your level of fracture emotionally. Like you're gonna meet your match every time. So if you don't like what you've been, who you've been matched with, then there's definitely work to be done. You know what I'm saying? And there's definitely a lot of internal work to be done. So that you don't encounter people who have these tactics, because again, at its base, it's fear. So for example, let's say you're the nicest person in the world. Let's say you're a giver personality. You would never cheat on anybody. You would never lie to anybody. You're always thoughtful. These are positive qualities, right? So you may be like, well, if that's me, how do I keep ending up with these people who are trying to torture me on an emotional level. I don't deserve that, right? But if you boil it all the way down, it's not that you're matched with them because y'all think the same and you just as cruel, you just don't know it. Nah, it goes to the extremes. If you boil it all the way down, on the gaslighter side,
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
you both may have experienced abandonment. You both may have experienced, neglect or abuse. If you really do the numbers, if you really look at the data between you and some of your exes, you may have grown up similar. The difference is how you navigated the trauma. Some people navigate the trauma to become takers. Other people navigate the trauma to become givers. So there's you'll hear me say this in spaces like there's over givers and there's over takers. There's people who take trauma and say, for the rest of my life, I'm never going to allow anybody to hurt me again. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take from everybody that I encounter. So any relationship I go into, I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to not be held accountable. I'm going to torture them to the point of vulnerability and weakness so that they will always stay with me, and I can control them so that they can't hurt me and make me vulnerable and break. So it's almost like being impervious to heartbreak. That's their goal in life. So that initial hurt as a kid has pushed them into this space where they say, I'm not going to be hurt again. I'm going to hurt them instead. I'm going to be the initiator, and I'm going to create a situation and a dynamic, and I'm going to choose people who are who their hurt makes them give. My hurt makes me take. I'm gonna choose people who, and like I said, overgiver and overtaker. That's a perfect match, right? If you look at it, they always link. And on the giver side, where how that's built is that the abandonment may cause you to feel that I have to give in order to keep people around. The abandonment hurts so bad that I have to be this rescuer pleaser because that's how I'll keep them. I'll keep friends because I'll do everything they need done, regardless of if I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I don't have the energy, I'm sick. I'm going to do it anyway because if I don't, they might leave me. And I remember what leaving feels like. I remember what that hurt felt like. I can't handle that. So I'm gonna be the people pleaser and the person who does any and everything for everybody, right? And so when it comes down to it, this this is something that is majorly important to focus on, and it's something that is it has origins. So I wanted you guys to really be able to see where it comes from, so you know what you're dealing with, and you also know that it's not going to change. And I see you, FBA Kurt, I'm gonna get you on in a minute. um you also want to see that it's not going to change. So a lot of times you may be in these relationships where somebody is gaslighting, and they get you to a point where, one, you feel like you stuck because you're not gonna find anybody else, so you might as well stay in whatever this is, so you downplay it. But then you also may think that, well, I see the good in this person, right? I know they love bomb from the beginning, so they must know how to show some sort of love, right? And you start rationalizing, you think that they can improve. This is not a situation where somebody's going to improve. Now, nothing's impossible. I'm not saying people can't improve, but in most cases, if somebody is that far gone, that's their motion. That's how they move, because they're protecting themselves. So they're not going to remove 30, 40 years of walls that they have built to protect themselves for one person. That in most cases, that's something that's not likely to happen. So it's important to focus on the healing first, so you can spot this and identify it early. not resonate with it and be in a position, in a power position, to be able to reject it. So I definitely want to, at this point, let everybody come up. If you have input, if you have feedback, if you want to chop it up, if you want to even just talk about some of the experiences that you have been through, without naming names, etc., and just talk about, have you experienced gaslighting? Like, do you know what that's like, and how was your experience? But FBA Kurt, good to see you, man. Let me hear what you got.
Yeah, I've been gaslighted before. Like what happened, but I've been gaslighted before in my life. To be honest, can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you. What type of like, what's some examples of like what the person would do?
Probably just ignoring like how like I'm feeling that certain day. Like if I had a bad day at work and I'm tired, I'm trying to like relax and be calm at home and settle in. And I ask her like a couple questions or something, and then she just don't want to hear me out or listen. Yeah, shit like that.
Right, and that's a good point. Like when it comes to gaslighting, like a lot of times, especially now, it's made into a gender specific thing. Like only men gaslight women. It doesn't go the other way. And we need to know that it goes both ways. It definitely goes both ways. And putting you in a position where your feelings are not valid, or they're not worth acknowledging, lets you know a lot. Lets you know a lot right there, because it's already imbalanced. If the way I look at it is like, if we're in a if there's a relationship, if I'm putting myself in a relationship with somebody, like, I want it has to be a reciprocal relationship. Like the woman I choose has to be in it to reciprocate. And because as a man, I think a lot of times, as men, we get shamed for having um certain standards in a relationship, like, and it go both ways too, you know what I'm saying? But I think just the narrative a lot of times on social media is like, we're supposed to be these individuals that give and provide, but don't receive on any level, like any emotional support, or whatever is whatever's needed, right? Because I think that's the whole point. Life is crazy enough to run, so if I'm running solo, life is crazy enough to navigate, but I'll be damned if I bring somebody into my space to add as somebody that I would pour into and support, and invest in, and all of that, invest my time in, and my heart into, and everything like that, only to end up being a worker who doesn't, in a dynamic where there's no reciprocation. It's just not something I'm interested in doing, because it's imbalance, it's uneven. And like FBA Kurt was saying, it can happen, you know being it can happen in circumstances where your partner is just kind of like like denying you the any reciprocation, or just not caring about how you feel in a scenario, or minimizing it too. That's a lot of things. That's another thing too. um or either minimizing it or turning it back on you. So for example, like, if you had communicated, where you were emotionally, and then she turned that into, how can you tell me about what's going on with you right now? Can't you see that I'm feeling this type of way, or whatever? And then so now uh now it's positioned that you are now offending her by you trying to talk about how you feel. So it's there's a lot of imbalances that can occur. And I think it, on both sides of the coin. I think, on the women's side, a lot of times, with the guys, at least what I've noticed and heard, is on the just being held accountable to what's permissible in a relationship, I guess. Like I guess there might be a standard put forward in the beginning, but then if they want to do other things, they may get the twist in your mind, or the tactics can run deep, and they can vary. You know what I'm saying? And you can be in a space where it's hard to. The problem with gaslighting is that it if you live, especially if you live with the person, you're in a situation where it's very difficult. They're difficult to deflect it and defend against it because there's nobody else in the house with you. So a lot of times, if you live in, let's say you're in a situation where you're dating somebody, y'all live together, and you go to work most of the day, and you come back to that same house, right? So the house is supposed to be the peace, the headquarters, like the restful place, the refuge, right? But if you're in this type of relationship, it's not that. And in a lot of cases, the work might be the workplace might be the breath of fresh air, whatever. But I say that to say, at work, in most cases, you don't have the type of type of relationship with people that you work with where you could just tell them about your business like that, or about your relationship. So you're not gonna get the validation you need in the workplace most of the time. But that's where you are most of the day. And then you come home, you already tired, right? And you're in a situation where you got to deal with somebody either minimizing, manipulating, or you know deflecting everything back onto you, and then you don't have anybody around you to say, hey, that you don't got to deal with that, or that don't even make sense, or yes you did, or yes she did say such and such 2 weeks ago. But like, you don't have anybody else, you don't have another voice. And that's why gaslighting can really be really painful to deal with, because you you only have that other voice. And when you're living with somebody, the emotional energy is very strong. So if somebody is giving you bad energy and they translating that onto you, and now you can't release this energy, and all you got is home and work, you got a problem. And you may be trying to work it out, you may be trying to have certain conversations, uh but you're not getting anywhere, because again, this person has built in these particular guards to where the biggest fight you're going to have is for that person to be accountable for certain things. And that's going to be a losing battle. It don't matter what you throw at them, right? It's all going to be either a deflected. Even if you got proof of something, it's still gonna be the strongest and the most consistent deflection. And so it's not even worth it to be to subject yourself to that. It's not worth it for you to be putting yourself in that position, because it's added compound trauma, and it's added onto the stress you already have. Like I said, if you live with the person, all you got is working home. And then here's the other thing: if you try to, go hang out with somebody, with your friends or something like that, you know that when you get back, you might have to deal with that. You that might be a issue. Then that might be some sort of fight, or turn into something else, right? And so, you know, to be in a relationship and to be connected to somebody who is not reciprocal, who can't see your point of view, who refuses to be accountable for any of their actions, and has no concern whatsoever as far as your emotional state. um this person is draining your life force. And I need y'all to know, you should not be staying in situations like that out of fear that, A, if I leave, this person's going to self-destruct. B, if I leave, I'm not going to be able to meet somebody else. you know any sort of fears that keep you there is you welcoming more stress than you need to. And it's going to be very, very difficult. Like I was saying in FBA Empress's space, shout out to her space, that was fire earlier. um like I was saying in there, you can't heal if you're still in the shootout, right? So it's hard to heal yourself in a toxic you got to get out the environment to heal the wounds up first, because otherwise you're going to try to heal wounds and be catching more at the same time. And so, if any of you either are in or know people who are in situations like this, you definitely want to make it a point to really examine the pros and cons, and have other level-minded people be able to tell you the truth, about the situation, and be able to say, like, look, like, this isn't this isn't for you. This is draining the life out of you. This is changing you. This is and it also hardens you, and it makes you more pessimistic about the future, about relationships, about people. It starts to really darken your view the longer you stay there, because like I mentioned in the other space, like, uh, this this darkness and a lot of this trauma response that's active and dominant in a lot of people, it's contagious, which is why it's almost, well, I guess it is a matter of life and death who you choose to be in a relationship with. Who you choose to be in a relationship with is a life and death situation, because um number one, if you choose wrong, you could shorten your lifespan. If you choose the wrong person, not that they're gonna kill you flat out. They might, if you choose the really, if you really choose wrong. But what I'm saying is, like, you compound your stress, you compound your anxiety, depression, all of these different things, and you start to darken it. It starts to show up in your mental health, but also in your physical health as well. You stop, focusing on growth. You fall off of your routines. You're not working out as much. You eating bad. You drinking, smoking. All of this. All of you start doing all of these different things based on trying to cope with an individual that shouldn't be there in the first place. And the longer you stay, the more effects, the more negative effects, it has on you. So it's something that, to be wary of. But I see you, Angelique, on this stage. I'm about to see how you feel about it. What's your thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So, my question is, when it's a situation where the environment can't change and the person is dealing with someone who's essential, in their life, like let's say like a very close family member, and they're not in a position where that can be changed, what would you recommend as far as navigating, okay, they're being like gaslit, and then, trying to maintain their own peace, their own, you know, positive mental space within that environment?
Great question. You mean somebody that somebody would have to live with, like, and they couldn't move
Yeah,
or couldn't move or couldn't, that sort of thing?
right, right.
Okay. Yeah, great question. I think in that instance, I would say, if somebody is stuck, and you're living under this type of situation, um number one, you have to create the best mental health for yourself would mean to create the most distance between you and that person. So that could mean, spending more time outside of the house than inside. That could mean spending less time communicating rather than, certain communications. That could also mean having a conversation uh around boundaries for that particular family member. And not to say that they would follow it, and because it kind of depends on the dynamic, because if it's like a teenager or something like that, who's stuck and not old enough to move yet, and that type of thing, I would definitely say to, seek out outside support, certain maybe support groups, or, what I'm saying, like to so that you can release what they're giving. Because if you look at it um if you think of those aquarium tanks, like those tanks you use to put fish in, once you get to a certain capacity. When you pour water in, the water overflows, right? So it's like if you have to look at uh toxic energy the same way. You don't want to get to a point where it's coming out of the top. Like, so you want to monitor your levels. And so, number one, as little contact as possible, and as little, but also making sure that you release what's there. So it's like to not let it fill up as much, but also to have like almost like another like to channel it, to have another reservoir coming out to release what's already in there, right? To keep a constant um to keep a positive state of mind. So that's why I say support groups, whether that's therapy groups or any way that you can be in an environment where you can get the validation, you can get the coping strategies, you can do things self-care oriented, um that dissipate some of that toxic energy, because like different meditations, journaling, right? Creativity, right? Doing certain things where you can focus on something other than that individual. Because, a lot of times, like I was saying, it's very much contagious. And sometimes people who are in this state of mind, these people who are gaslighters or manipulators, may look at people who are vulnerable, even in their own, it's not only relationships, even people that are in their own family, as targets. I've seen situations where the mother-daughter relationship, I've seen a lot of toxic mother-daughter relationships where, you see that vulnerability in them, and they remind you of yourself in that space, and you hate the vulnerability that you used to have. So you start to harden them, and by, you know, having this emotional torture hierarchy situation, um, because you don't want them to have a chance at being better than you, or you don't want them, or they don't want them to have a shot at, having a better life, what I'm saying, and having this like vindictive uh relationship, with their daughters and things like that. So it crosses all lines. That's why it's definitely something um to be wary of. And for anybody who may be, kind of stuck in those situations, you have to double down on creating distance, because when gaslighting is the primary tactic, you can't believe anything. You know what I'm saying? And that's a very strange place to feel like you constantly lied to, or you're constantly put under this spell, right? This is 50 Cent line that's always been my favorite. He said, I hate a liar more than I hate a thief. A thief is only after my salary. A liar's after my reality. And like that's really the most connected line to this topic that I can even think of. But he put it perfectly. It's like, a thief is somebody who can just take your money. You can replace the money, but somebody who is, you know, using lying and illusions to manipulate and control you, it's more insidious, because they're after your reality. They're trying to create your reality for you and manipulate that for you. And that's your choice to make. You get to live in your own reality. But when somebody is trying to distort it, and trying to, what I'll call, um widen your wounds, right? Because again, these people know where you're weak at, especially family, because they've seen you. You think relationships are difficult, like family members know you from birth in a lot of cases. So you might be in a really difficult situation because they know exactly who you are, where you're weak at, where your mama was weak, you know what I'm saying? And they know how to get you to do certain things or say certain things, or going on down the line. And the problem with that is a lot of times they've been hurt, and they nobody was there for them. So they want to create that cycle and continue that cycle for other kids who may be in the family. You know what I'm saying? And that's something that's not fair, but it exists. And so you have a right to protect yourself at all times. You have a right to build a routine around self-healing and creating peace for yourself and generating peace for yourself at all times. And this has to be the goal at all times and on a daily basis. Like, whatever you need to do to rid yourself of that energy, because a lot of times it sticks, which is why it's not good to go from relationship to relationship, you know what I'm saying, without that healing in between, because a lot of that residual pain, a lot of that residual self-doubt that was implanted by, the people that, would gaslight you and what have you, like that, a lot of that is still there. And a lot of those wounds are still there and can be seen by future gaslighters. They are on wound watch. They're flaw watchers, right? Because here's another sign that you'll see when you're dating, right? If you're dating somebody and you find that at a certain point they just become critical of a lot of stuff. Like they might criticize like what you wearing, or how you talking, or how many curse words you use, or you know what I'm saying, this restaurant is something wrong. There's always something wrong with something. But then when you bring up any criticism to them, it doesn't exist. There's no flaws that exist in them, but all the flaws exist in the outer world, and that everybody is something wrong with everybody else, including yourself. Like that's a red flag right there. You don't want to deal with that because this person is oriented around pointing the finger. And then so if they're always looking at everybody else's flaws, you can count on the fact that they don't have the self-awareness to be able to accept accountability for anything. They don't even have they refuse to have the self-awareness, because their awareness is everybody else. And the reason for that is because they have to be on watch, because they are scared of being hurt by other people, right? It's a reason. And to bring it back up to, like, we talk about, oppression and white supremacy, things like that. Think of the world we live in, and why and how there's this culture of invasion of privacy. There's cameras everywhere. Everything is always monitored and watched. And what type of person has to watch everything constantly? Somebody who is fearful of a certain outcome, right? And you only have to be fearful of certain outcomes if you are doing something worthy of people coming to get you, or you're doing something corrupt and you're afraid of backlash. So you have to see every single thing that everybody's doing. National security, I got to hear everything that everybody's saying. That is a fear-based structure. And we have to know that down to us as individuals, we can't move in a fear-based state of mind. We have to create our own outcomes, and we do that by designing our own life and healing the parts of us that shouldn't be there. Because if you encounter childhood trauma, you didn't cause that, right? Then that wasn't your fault. But it is our responsibility individually and as a collective to focus on healing now that we're adults and moving forward in life. And we all want better for ourselves in different areas. And I'm sure we're all doing great jobs in some respects. But you know, we all been through stuff that has changed us, man. Like, we've been through things that have altered who we are, who we wanted to be. We've been in relationships that may have caused us to be doubtful, either of ourselves or of, just dating as a whole. But it's about the growth. The more knowledge, the more self-awareness we get, the more we can work on being our best and attracting the best, than the people that we deserve, who are willing to be reciprocal. So yeah, that's my time. I appreciate y'all coming through as always. I see FBA Empress, Miss G, Tay, Squirrel, I see Nadira. Appreciate y'all coming through. Again, this is every Tuesday, Above Trauma Tuesdays. We're gonna be doing this thing every Tuesday. Um, if you haven't already, definitely click the link in the jumbotron for the live event. We're doing a live event, the keys to healing Black trauma. We're gonna talk, mental health. We're gonna talk life purpose. We're gonna talk physical health. We're gonna be talking about, relationship health as well. Just strategies to grow, strategies to heal, strategies to reprogram ourselves where peace is dominant, right? Because we need it more than anybody else on the planet, and we deserve it more than anything because of the fact of the things that we have been through and continue to go through. You know what I'm saying? So, dedicating myself to being a part of this healing, and being, and being a leader in this space as far as just pushing us all forward because we all deserve it. So, definitely shoot me a DM if y'all have any questions. And definitely click the link if you want to come to the event, or if you want to set up a meeting with me and just talk options as far as trauma recovery coaching, and for yourself, for family, etc. Just click the link in my profile. It'll be a link tree there, and you'll be able to just book a little session with me, a little strategy session, 30-minute joint. We can talk it out and figure out what you want to do. So thank you for coming through. Definitely put the notifications on. I'm gonna be back every Tuesday, and y'all have a great night.